Perfect, perfect. And then we're going to get Marshall and get him started. So by way of introduction, if you don't know who I am, my name is Felicia Ward. I'm the solutions architect for Red Hat. My co-host is Marshall Hall. He's also a solutions architect for Red Hat and the cloud. So between the two of us, we hope to give you a very informative presentation and demo today. So I'm going to turn it over to Marshall and let him go ahead and share his screen and launch this presentation. So Marshall, give it a whirl.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. And let me share my screen. And we'll get going. So I'll give it a couple seconds to make it around the world. So today we're going to be talking about automating security with Ansible. And so this is a follow-on presentation from the presentation that was done last week. So last week we talked about the use cases. We talked about the theory of automating your security operations with Ansible. We talked about a lot of different aspects of it, the pros and everything that went around it, how many people are doing it, just a lot of great information. And so just in case anybody missed that, I just wanted to go over a couple of those slides. So if you did show up, I'm not going to throw too many of those slides back at you, but I just wanted to have a couple just form a frame of reference in case anybody did miss. So we'll be talking about the Ansible automation platform today. And so this is just a slide that goes over Ansible and shows the many layers of Ansible. And so so Ansible is really formed by the engine itself. The engine can really does most of the work, and the work is done in the form of those playbooks. We have an automation orchestration platform in the form of Tower. We have and then that plugs into your infrastructure for automation. So, and then there's hundreds of use cases to feed into that. So Ansible is definitely something that is useful beyond security. We'll be talking about security specifically today. So one slide too many. So what is Ansible security automation? This is an expansion deeper into, we're going to take a little deeper look into the use case today by showing you some demos and going through 3 specific use cases. So the Ansible security operation is really designed to provide deeper security through several aspects. So last week we discussed how security really starts way before this part of what we're seeing on the screen right here. So security really starts at the beginning of IT when we bring our infrastructure up, when we configure initial nodes, when we configure firewalls, when we configure anything that we bring into our IT environment, how we configure those, how we're disciplined with things like passwords and just a whole host of things go and feed into the secure environment. So Ansible would help us do those things. As we move into the security environment itself, Ansible helps to automate the specific functions of our security environment so that we can streamline our operation within our security environment so that we're spending less time operating it and more time investigating incidents, reacting to incidents, and securing our IT environment. So last week we also talked about the journey to security automation. So in some respect, every organization goes through this journey at some level. So we, most organizations start at the opportunistic level, move to systematic, and go to institutionalized by, starting small and then implementing pieces and then getting to this orchestration and automated response functions. So today we're going to talk about this middle piece. We're going to talk about orchestrating in the middle part of this. So we were planning on demonstrating a larger portion and demonstrating the orchestration and the automation response as well. But it's just such a large area to demonstrate in such a short period of time. And we wanted to really dive deep into each section. So we decided to break it up into a couple of different pieces for you to give everybody a full demonstration of each function so that you can have a good demonstration of each function in each set of use cases instead of just blowing through a couple of surface use cases in each area. So with that being said, we're gonna get into the use cases. As promised, we didn't spend too much time covering ground that we've already covered. So the first use case we have is going to be investigation enrichment. So what we have in our environment is we have just a small little network. We have a firewall. We have a Snort IDS system. We have QRadar, and we have a security operations center, amongst other things. That's part of our security infrastructure. So for our investigation enrichment use case, the flow that we're going to be demonstrating today, we're going to be demonstrating that Snort will match some suspicious activity and pass that to QRadar, and the QRadar security analyst is going to look at that and decide to begin an investigation. And so once they begin that investigation, they decide that they want to enrich the logs to determine if it's a false positive or not. So normally during that enrichment phase or during that handoff, the security analyst would go back to the Snort administrator and pass off the work to him, and then it would sit in his queue, and there'd be this back and forth. And so with Ansible, we're able to give the SOC analyst the ability to immediately modify those rules and then make those changes immediately. And so we'll be able to see that, and then it'll go into the next phases. So let me share my browser if I can find it.
Time for another dorky joke. If you put 1,000,000 monkeys on 1,000,000 keyboards, one of them will eventually write a Java program. The rest of them will write Perl programs. Da-da.
All righty. Thanks for that. So what we have is since we really don't have a real attacker on our network right now that we can count on for us, those guys just aren't very reliable. Plus, they usually sleep during the day, the slackers that they are. We have a simulation coming up. So that's another great thing about Ansible is we can do all kinds of things like simulation. So we'll start a simulation with Ansible, and so we just kicked off a little simulation. Within QRadar, we'll be able to log in and see the log events should be coming in shortly. Oh, there we go. So we're seeing some log events here. So coming in from our checkpoint firewall. So the security analyst is seeing these events come in and decides that they need to investigate those events. So we have, so the security analyst has, in the course of this investigation, writes a playbook to create a new snort rule, and this new snort signature is going to enrich this specific event just for this one IP address, so that when and what we're going to do is we're going to block this one IP address from creating any more events, so that we can see, so that the analyst can see, is this coming from multiples? Is this coming from multiple sources, or is this coming from a single source? So the next, so the analyst has written a playbook, enriched snort rule. And we see that it's not a very difficult rule that's been written. This is actually a rule that probably could have been repurposed from some other rule that was written in the past. And we are going to all right. So we see that Ansible changed the snort rules for us. And in a few moments, we should see the checkpoint logs stop. And so as the analyst is going through this, they decide that this, they make their analysis. They do, if it's a false positive or if it's a real event, then they can do additional actions. And then as they finish their analysis and go write up their after action review of the event. So if they continue taking additional action and blacklist of IP address in the firewall, or do something else, in this case, for this use case, we decided that this was a false positive. So we didn't write any additional, so there was no additional playbooks written against this use case. And so, then you can, the Security Operations Center could pass this off to the threat analysis team to write additional snort rules to look for this behavior in the future. All right, so we'll go back to our slides and take a look at our next use case. So our next use case is threat hunting. And this is where we can use Ansible to, where the Security Operations Center or the security team can use Ansible to go looking for threats, or to enhance information that they're receiving, to find the additional information that they need. So we have a fairly simple example put together, but there's definitely more complex examples that we can think of as we do this. But in this example, we have a distributed denial of service attack against our network. So with this distributed denial of service attack, we'll see this coming into QRadar. we are going to deploy, the security analyst deploys an additional snort rule to gather additional information on the attack. And once they determine that it is a distributed denial of service attack, which is fairly apparent right away, or not apparent right away, then we can either blacklist or whitelist the IP addresses that are involved in the attack. And we can see how that is going to play out in the demonstration once I switch back to my web browser. So for this, we're going to use Ansible Tower. So within Ansible Tower, so I'm just going to log in as the admin real quick, just so we can start the just so I can start the attack. So for so we have a template that we're the start DDoS attack simulation. We'll just click the little rocket button and it's going to get going for us. So this is Ansible Tower. So this is the orchestration part of Ansible. Makes Ansible much easier to work with if you have a larger organization, and if you need additional capabilities around access control and permissions, and some of those enterprise level controls around Ansible. We see that the playbook ran to start this, so we'll go ahead and log out. Within this attack, we have quite a bit of notifications now coming in. Showing our denial of service attack. Oh. So sometimes it gets a little, I guess I can go up here and make it a little bit easier. Try to short circuit the process, and that it's not as easy as it looks sometimes. Log source. So checkpoint. So we see our firewall messages coming in again with our distributed denial of service attack. I think this is actually, this might be creating an offense now. So this actually is no, that's unknown log event. Maybe that's not. So that's not the event I was looking for. But it should pop up in a few minutes. So the great thing about live demos is sometimes they never go the way that you'd like them to go. So in the interest of time, I'm going to spill the beans and let you know that there's eventually going to pop up an offense that will say distributed denial of service attack. So then we'll go back to our Ansible tower system, and we're going to add a snort role. So the analyst, so in the operations center, there's an analyst that's in charge of the IDS system, or is in charge of monitoring, that has access to modify the IDS system. And one of the, so when they log into Tower, they have the ability to add an IDPS rule, or one of their templates is add IDPS rule. So, so the analyst decides they're going to add a rule to Snort. And when this rule launches, it doesn't just launch the template, it comes up with a survey. So this is kind of interesting. A survey, why do you want to know what I feel about this? No, it's not really that kind of survey. This is a survey. Within Tower, it uses surveys, it calls it a survey, to allow you to enter input. So this gives us a way to enter the parameters that we need to pass into the playbook that we're using. So for this playbook, we need to pass in the snort rule that we are wanting to add into snort. So here's the snort rule that we want to add. So this is based on the denial of service that we're receiving. And these are coming from the snort logs. In the interest of time, we are not going to go digging for those. And then we see that now we have extra variables. Tower snort rule is what we just entered into the survey field, and then we'll launch that. And now it's going to be running. So as this runs, you see that there's different colors for different things. And so, so green means okay, blue means it's skipped. If we see any red, that's usually not a good thing. And then at the end, we'll see a play recap. So then it'll, we can look at the recap and see what was changed, what failed, before we move on. A lot of other great statistics are shown, the elapsed time and some other stuff that is useful if we're keeping track of that. So, so we modified the IDS to block reporting of those events, and the security operation team continues looking at this event as it's coming in, and they decide. So now it's time to decide if it's actually a distributed denial of service attack or not. If it is a distributed denial of service attack, they need to block it. And if it's not a denial of service attack, then what do we do with all these logs that are clogging up our SIM? Because now we're paying for extraneous logs for an event that we are considering to be normal. So our firewall administrator has decided to that this is a normal behavior, that this is actually coming from just a single IP address, and that that it's authorized behavior from that IP address. So he's going to whitelist the attacker. So he goes into his tower console and clicks the whitelist attacker, and he's easily able to make that adjustment from the operations center without having to go to the actual firewall administrators and get that done through that process. So the Security Operations Center is able to handle all these tasks And these are pre-approved tasks. These are things that they're not, especially through Tower. These are, these aren't things that they're able to go in and make a lot of changes to. So this is one of the great benefits of Towers. It gives a lot of control to those that need it, but also limits a lot of what they can do. So so that's kind of a give and take of the Ansible platform, if you will. So as you start talking to customers and use cases, that's a great point to think about as we talk about those things when we talk about Ansible versus Tower. So that brings us at the end of the second use case. So I will switch back to the slides one more time for me. And hopefully I'm sharing the slides again. Let me just make sure I'm, nope. No, I'm not sharing. Am I sharing the slides now, Felicia?
You certainly are.
All right, perfect. All right, that brings us into the third use case. So the third use case is incident response. And you may be asking yourself, hey, wait a minute, didn't we just do incident response? Okay. So we did a little bit of threat hunting and incident response. So this is just going to be pure incident response. So for this use case, we put together an SQL injection attack that QRadar is going to pick up. And the security analyst, once they see this SQL injection attack, there's no need to do any real investigation because we understand what an SQL injection attack is, we understand what they're trying to do, and we understand that it's not good. So the idea is to stop these as quickly as possible to keep people out of our networks and out of our applications. So as soon as the analyst sees that, we want to block that as quickly as possible. What we want to do is give our analyst as much power as possible to block that. And so with Ansible, it gives us the ability to modify or make pre-approved changes to firewalls that can block things like this. And so with our use case, we've set up a playbook that allows the security analyst to blacklist an attacker, such as someone that's trying an SQL injection attack, the moment that they observe them doing that, instead of having to go through and, like we said before, notify somebody. Maybe they're on lunch break, maybe they're busy, maybe they're doing something else. Maybe they just aren't interested right now in doing something. Who knows? So, but this gives the Security Operations Center the ability to stop that attack right away, and then they can pass that off to the application owners. They can pass that off to another part of the security team to see why did someone pick that SQL injection attack. Why did they pick that target? There obviously must be some enticing aspect to it. So with that, we will switch back to, so this is, we're just going to go back to the command line. So for this, we have another wonderful attack playbook that we put together. And I just have to find, where does it get started? So the SQL attack simulation. if there's a lot of questions about how these playbooks are put together or about Ansible configuration, we can certainly do another webinar on that, because that can be a whole webinar. But I left this window open at the top just to kind of show you these are not, this is not rocket science by any stretch of the imagination. Ansible is plain English, fairly easy to get a hold of. It has a lot of complexity to it if you need it, but it's not so complex that you have to, go to school for 10 years to be able to make it work. So anyway, we're gonna, oh, that's not the one. That's the one. So, so this is going to start an SQL injection attack. And this wonderful SQL injection attack is going on within QRadar. We see the events coming in. And no offense yet, but the offense is coming. So, so we see this SQL injection attack. So, so maybe someone just got a brand new copy of Nmap and they decided, let's try it out against your company's website and see how secure they are. And I know that this doesn't really say SQL injection attack, and that this you're having to take my word for it. But for the sake of brevity for our demo, we're kind of cutting some of these some of the show me points out. If you'd like to see proof of all of this outside of the time we have here, I'd be more than happy to show you afterwards if you'd like to see. So so we have these events coming in. Someone's running SQL map against us, and it is not looking good for the home team right now. But we have a security operations analyst that's on the ball. He just woke up from his nap and is ready to tackle the world. So he notices his next SQL injection attack and puts together a playlist to block it on the firewall. And since we're updating the firewall, he's going to also have to reload that change as well and do a couple other things. So so we're going to start that playbook. The analyst starts that playbook, and he's able to stop this attack in a relatively short period of time from detection of the attack. So we'll give it a little bit more time. The creation of the policy on a checkpoint firewall is not too bad. It's the actual installation of the policy that can take a little bit of time. But we see one of the differences between running these playbooks from the command line versus tower. You see, we don't get the time that it took to run the playbook. we just get the play in the play recap. We just get the statistics of what was okay, what was changed, and the rest of the statistics that you see there. So we see that there was 2 changes made. So we have 2 changes that were made, and and just to show you that the changes were actually made, and that this isn't just like a like a made up demo. I will the last thing I will share with you is, if I can find it, so this is the Checkpoint Firewall remote desktop. This is the remote desktop to the Checkpoint Firewall, and this is the rule that we configured to drop those packets. So before we started this lab, this rule that I have my cursor on was set to allow these packets, and now it's set to drop. So the security analyst was able to modify those rules without working or without having to pass that work off to the firewall team or to another team. So these are some of the powerful things that we can hand to our security operations center and automate our security practices. So I hope you found this helpful, and I hope that this helps in your conversations. And as I said earlier, we're gonna put together another demo coming in the future to tackle that piece with Resilient, because there's a lot of use cases around Resilient, and I just took 30-ish minutes going over the use cases really just around QRadar. So QRadar and firewalls and just kind of the ancillary, the middle part of not really orchestration of security. So so with that, I think I'm supposed to pass it back to Felicia for her part.
Fantastic. We did have a question. Could you give a high level of how Ansible works with IBM Resilient? I mean, I understand that it's a SOAR product, but maybe a little bit lower of a level than that, but higher than the demo.
Sure. So so if we take a step back and think about IBM Resilient, IBM Resilient is a security orchestration and automation response platform. So what does that mean? Resilient provides a platform to orchestrate and automate your security response. So when you go into Resilient, so we can feed Resilient from QRadar, from from a lot of different sources of data, so that it collects all of the information, all of the, let's say, artifacts of your data. And so let's say QRadar creates an incident or has an offense in QRadar terms. QRadar creates an offense, or you create an incident or whatever in some other SIM, or an alert or whatever they call them. Something happens in some other system that you're using, and it generates something. Well, we send that off to Resilient, and Resilient creates an incident in Resilient, and so that incident starts a whole new process for you. So your process within Resilient could be, here's our, what is your security policy for, what is your security policy for anything? What's your security policy for a social media breakdown, or for, ransomware? So let's say ransomware. Okay, what's your policy, what's your playbook on policy? You know, that's a hot topic right now. So Resilient lets you automate your playbook, your paper playbook that you've put together. So then when you start actually, you know, if you actually get ransomware, you can go in and say, here's all the steps we need to do. We have to get HR involved. We have to get legal involved. We have to get PR involved. We have to get the CEO, the CIO. We have to get all these people, and it starts creating tasks for you that that you have already put together on paper. And then it starts collecting artifacts from around your organization. And so that's what Resilient does. What it doesn't really do very well is it doesn't allow people that use Resilient to collect that information very easily. So let's say you have a ransomware attack and you need to go to every computer that's possibly infected. Ransomware is kind of maybe not a good one because it locks the computer. But let's say you have a virus. You know, let's say you have a virus infection that you need to remediate, and you have to go around to every computer and figure out who's got this. You know, who downloaded this package that could possibly infect you. So you have 100. You have 1,000 people in your organization. You have to go around to 1,000 computers to do that. And in your security in Resilient, there's a task that says check every computer that could possibly be infected. And so the guy that's got that task says, holy crap, how do I do that? Well, with Ansible, we can create a playbook that says, go check every computer for this artifact or for this thing. And so then whoever's the operator of Resilient can just task Ansible to start doing those tasks for them, rather than having to do that manually. So that's where Ansible fits in. Ansible automates those tasks that someone is manually doing within Resilient, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. Do we have any other questions, guys? If there's no other questions, we're going to move on. Put them in the chat or in the Q&A window. I'm monitoring both of them. I'll give you guys a minute. I can tell you more nerdy jokes in the meantime. What do you call 8 hobbits? A hobbit. Ta-da! All right, it doesn't look like we have any more questions popping up, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here. Next week, I am doing a webinar on Tuesday, and we are going to talk about verticals and how to sell Ansible in security use cases, and I'm going to get into your best sales speeches, and we're really going to dive deep on how to bring it to your customers. So I really would appreciate you guys joining me on that. Marshall, can you bring up the screen that shows a time and date for our webinar coming up on Tuesday? I'm going to send all of you guys an invitation. I expect all of you guys to be there. I'm going to look up some more nerdy jokes that might get even more obscure into tech, and maybe I'll stop picking on Java, but who knows? Maybe by the time the webinar comes, it'll have caught up to me. Da-dum. And with that, guys, I'm going to go ahead and log off here. Thank you all. You've been a wonderful audience. Next week, 9 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Thursday. Oh, it's Thursday, not Tuesday. I've lost track of my days. Goodness gracious. You guys can join us, and we would really appreciate that. So I'm going to stop the recording